We are an engine of economic development for the state, a partner of social service and government agencies, and a reference for the people of Illinois. We are a cultural oasis on the prairie and home of Big Ten athletics. We are a marketplace of ideas, cultures, and traditions. We're your university.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the introductory episode of the Learning and Labor podcast. My name is Nico Johnson Fuller, and I use he/him pronouns. The audio you just heard outlined one perspective about the University of Illinois. There's some truth to that story about what UIUC is, but there's also a lot missing. My goal in this podcast is to tell some of those missing stories. These stories will span different eras of our university's history, different places on campus, and different connections between UIUC and the rest of our state, the rest of the United States, and the whole world. As I've spent time as a student at UIUC, I've grown increasingly fascinated with exploring the deep history and intrinsic politics of our university. Part of this is that I think understanding the context of where you are can be enriching in itself, and can help you appreciate the place you're in more. But it's also more than that. A deeper understanding of the context you find yourself in can also help you change it. So I want to be transparent going into this project that part of my motivation is to tell stories that in some way motivate that change.
This new conception of a college meant that learning and labor were to be more closely related than ever before.
Alright, so I also want to talk a little bit about the title of this podcast. Learning and Labor is the official motto of UIUC. Its origins stem from the inaugural ceremony and an anthem written by John Milton Gregory, the first president of the institution. The second verse of the anthem includes the following lines: "And learning and labor, fit head for fit hand, shall crown with twin glories our broad prairie land." The first part of this was then taken for the motto Learning and Labor. And while it's not directly stated in what I just read for you, the meaning of this has to do with the industrial and agricultural focus of the university. Learning is supposed to be representative of the more theoretical science typically found in academia at the time, whereas labor is supposed to represent the more practical application of science into fields such as agriculture and industry. And this is a really important part of UIUC's early history, these ideas of learning and labor and the practical application of knowledge and the conflicts between these two different ideas, but it's actually not why I chose this title. To me, learning and labor is a perfect example of the idealized version of the university. And I think this idea can also be applied to different interpretations of the motto. For example, when I first saw the university's motto, Learning and Labor, there's different things that came to mind for me. I thought of learning as part of a mission of creating a space where everyone can seek out the education they desire without barriers. And for labor, what came to mind is respect and fair treatment for the workers that make this university possible. Regardless of how you interpret the motto, I think it's fair to say that some conception of learning and labor ought to be at the center of what the university cares about. And this is really what this podcast is about. Thinking about the contradiction between those ideals and reality, just exploring the deep history and politics of the institution, and hopefully connecting some of that to the change that needs to happen. So whenever I see the various manifestations of learning and labor on campus, whether it be the statues at Alma Mater or the inscription on the Hailing Gateway on the edge of campus, I think not just about the ideals of what UIUC can be, but how we can change things to actually get there.
Today, the people's universities cover almost the entire field of human knowledge, and their future rests almost entirely on the needs and the wishes of the people of the several states. The people created them. The people can take them away, or they may make them even more effective.
So I think for a natural starting point for this so-called People's University, it's worth going back to UIUC's founding, and specifically focusing on the land grant origins of the university and how that relates to stolen indigenous land. That's what episode 1 is going to explore, and it will be available within a few days of the release of this introductory episode. Thank you so much for listening to episode 0 of the Learning and Labor podcast. The sources for this episode and every episode I make will be in the show notes. Bye-bye.
Learning and labor. Station WILL has carried a special program this week giving information about the University of Illinois. If you have been a listener to these broadcasts, you have heard more or less about what the university does, how it does it, and what it hopes to do. Thank you, Dr. Willard.